Hey y'all, so we're back reading Black Marxism. We are on the last section of Richard Wright's chapter. This is on page 301, The Outsider as a Critique of Christianity and Marxism. And it's cloudy outside, so I apologize for the lack of lighting. The Outsider was completed several years after Wright had left the American Communist movement. It was received, however, as a further elaboration of Wright's reason for his action. Yet the novel's treatment of the party was less in the tradition of Chester Hymes's vitriolic Lonely Crusade or Ralph Ellison's satiric The Invisible Man than that of Arthur Koester, that's the last name, Darkness at Noon. Though Wright did develop in The Outsider a critique of the American left's race politics and of Stalinism, his intent was much broader, his object much more far-ranging. The novel was a parable. It was a moral, philosophic, and political exercise. Like the myth in Vedic groups, the purpose is to demonstrate the terrible consequence to the human spirit, as well as the social organization of a total exercising of social ideology. In White Man Listen, Wright would declare, I maintain that the ultimate effect of white Europe upon Asia and Africa was to cast millions into a kind of spiritual void. I maintain that it suffused their lives with a sense of meaninglessness. I argue that it not only, that it not merely, that I argue that it was not merely physical suffering or economic deprivation that has set over 1.5 billion colored people in a violent political motion. The dynamic concept of the void that must be filled, a void created by a thoughtless and brutal impact of the West upon 1.5 billion people is more powerful than the concept of class conflict and more universal. So I think about this in relation to, one, the dehumanizing effects of racism, but also what it does to our relationship, not only to ourselves and to other people. So one, like when it comes to any type of bigoted ideology or dominating ideology in the sense that like our relationships are supposed to be transactional and dominating and exploitative, one, do unto others as if you would want done unto you. Because every person is a reflection of you, every human being, in a sense. When you look at somebody in the eyes, you see yourself, right? Kind of. But what racism does, what sexism does, or like misogyny, or patriarchal institutions and ideology, is that it dehumanizes the other, and that it also dehumanizes the aggressor. It dehumanizes and devalues and degrades the other, the oppressed group, the marginalized group. And on top of that, the people that are in a privileged group are also dehumanized, are also devalued, are also disrespected, and so on and so forth. So on top of that, it aims to disconnect the relationship to the land, one, to ourselves, two. So like one of the effects of living in this, being socialized in this type of society is self-hatred, right? A lack of self-respect, a lack of self-love. Because of patriarchy, we conflate objectification with love, right? Because of racism, we're conflating objectification with love. Even though it's just the flip side of degradation, right? Of dehumanization, right? So on and so forth. And it also degrades indigenous, African, and other people's spiritualities. And it also emotionally stunts people. Because, like, what do you mean emotional repression, right? Emotional repression leads to anger, resentment, hatred. Girl, you know what I mean? And then on top, so like also with that, so say I dehumanized you. If I can dehumanize you, that means I have dehumanized myself. If I don't respect you based off an aspect of your identity, that means that I don't respect myself. You know, if I can hate you because of the color of your skin, that means that I hate myself, that I don't respect myself, that I don't love myself. Because what does it mean to hate somebody else based off the color of their skin? To believe in prejudicial beliefs, right? That will then instill in me a sense of insecurity, right? Like, say I'm a colorist. Say. Or if you've noticed, sometimes if you listen carefully to what racist people say or colorist people say or sexist people say, there is a sense of insecurity. There is a sense of insecurity. You can see this in the way that girls are socialized in high school. There's a sense of insecurity where we as women will slut shame other women. We as women will talk poorly about other women for the validation of men. There's a sense of insecurity that is being taught, right? Because no one is like born with this type of ideology. You have to be socialized in this type of society, which doesn't cultivate humanity. It's anti-human. And blah 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 blah. Okay. Without myths, that is, without meaning, consciousness is set adrift into terror. And yesterday I was at this Jacob Carruthers conference. It talks about, one of the things that was mentioned was myths. Myths are profoundly significant. It helps us understand how people see reality. So they were talking about in relation to ancient Egypt and Ma'at and that basis of reality and how people's perspective of their relationship not only to themselves but to others and the world around them, the universe around them, to the plants. How are we in relationship to the earth, right? How are we in relationship to the natural cycles, the seasons of the weather, so stuff like that. The desperation that is the condition of this degree of alienation, or Max Schuller's resentment. Hold up. Let me open up.
Ressentiment.
That's how it's said. Ressentiment. Resentment. Meaning, because that's how, whatever. Meaning is a deep-seated, chronic, and often repressed feeling of hostility, envy, and vengefulness arising from a sense of powerlessness, frequently rooted in a perception of being slighted or inferior. Think about that, right? Inferiority complex. Think about the ways in which, ooh, sorry, y'all. Think about Jim Crow. It's not going to be funny now. Okay, but think about Jim Crow with that myth that of the man in the Mandingo stereotype with black men. Because of the myth or the instilled white inferiority complex for white men, right? This is just, we're looking at history. Don't come for me, girl. Don't come for me. The way that people like react to information that's like a little bit like stirring is interesting. But during Jim Crow, they would say, "Oh, like white men, be careful. They gonna come get your daughters. They gonna come get the black man. They gonna come not get, but they're gonna take your white woman's womanhood." Right? And that then would feed into like that movie, The Birth of a Nation, like stuff like that. That would feed into this idea that you're inferior and you need to protect your woman, right? No, don't even pay attention to the fact that we already harm our woman. Now these people are going to harm our women. Now we got to lynch them. Now we got to castrate them. Right? Like the attacks against black men and black women, because lynching, like black women were also being lynched. There's this woman, Mary Turner. I think she was born at the same year of my papa's grandmother. She was lynched at, I think, 19 years old because she like was advocating for her husband because they killed her husband, right? And then she was like, "Fuck, hey," and she was 8 months pregnant. I think this happened in Georgia, and they cut her stomach open, stomped on her baby's head, and then killed her. You know what I mean? So it's not like right, but a part of this, like Jim Crow and like the sexual politics of white supremacy, was we have to protect white womanhood, or like Emmett Till. That's a better example. Emmett Till and what they did to him. Right? Okay, that's what that made me think of. I like using examples, but let me write that down. That was a good example, huh? Maybe. I hope. Oh, yup, girl, yup. I was right. I hope I'm right. I'm into Emmett Till, because that's a short note. Or Husserls. 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 That's the last name, I believe. Crisis inevitably required violence. Okay, the desperation that is the condition of this degree of alienation inevitably required violence. Violence is Violence is the final and last possible form that social action may assume. Moreover, Wright would demonstrate both, but think about how spiritual, soulless you have to be to do that to somebody. And then that ideology is passed down throughout the generations. We still see it today. Moreover, Wright was demonstrating both the necessity and the inevitability of ideology and its arbitrariness. No matter what meaning ideologies systematize, they are always subject to the abuses of power. When ideology is used for the purpose of domination, it must be opposed. Not by a counter ideology, but by the negation of ideology theory. In short, he was making the case for the necessity for a critical commitment, the sort of commitment that achieves its purpose by extraction from the historical legacy, the culture of a people. Underline. Such a commitment is made only through a consciousness capable of recreating meaning. Period. In The Outsider, Wright sought to subvert the two ideological and philosophic traditions of the heart of modern Western culture. First, he ridiculed the Judeo-Christian tradition of Judeo-Christian tradition by creating a protagonist whose very name is contradiction. Cross Damien, the demon Christ. Period. Cross Damien. I don't know if that's Damien. It's Damon. Demon. Cross Demon. Damien? Isn't there an E in Damien? Or am I slow? Maybe a little slow, but are we all a little bit? Has escaped Judeo-Christian morality through the recognition of its operative psychic force, a destructive, debilitating dread, guilt. Oh. Just as Marx earlier had recognized that religion, that is, Judaism, is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the sentiment of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions, Wright had perceived the truer historical significance of Christianity among blacks not as an instrument of domination, but as a philosophic adaptation to oppression. And I got some works for that, girl. Let me tell you, what's his name? David Walker. David Walker's Appeal. He's pretty much like, and these motherfuckers ain't really Christian, because no Christian person would enslave another person. And if we is all God's children, shouldn't we all be free? Exactly. A lot of people, while yes, religion has been used, we're good. It's okay. We're fine. Look, everything in place. Period. Scared me. While Christianity has been used to oppress people, it has also been used as a liberatory force. Now, girl, this is my genealogy stuff for my family. It's so fun. This is for my Nana's dad's side of the family. This one. Oh, and I also took some of my papa's speeches when he was working for the school board. I'm borrowing it. I didn't take it. I borrowed it. If you want, we can read David Walker's Appeal. It's really good. Oh, and I do kind of want to read this one. The Transformation of African Identities in Colonial and Antebellum South. Girl, it's good. I'm going to take that one out. Anyways, let's keep reading. Let's keep going. Sorry. But anyways, because that's the thing. The church was very important, right? And that was one way. Oh, there's this one article that talks about the synchronization. They put African spirituality under and cloaked it, right, in Christian ideology. You can also see this across the African diaspora. I don't know that much about Santeria, Vodun. But I think Vodun uses African spirituality and Catholicism. Santeria, Ifa, but like they don't. I would have to know. I would have to like look it up to learn to be like, oh, this is like this and this and this, and you know what I mean. But I know for hoodoo, at least, people hid root work and use of herbs, plants, and different things like that, or just regular traditions like the ring shout. You know how black people move in a church? Like the ring shout comes from the Akan tradition. And I have a book on that. But you know, I'm about to start going on a ramble. I am. But there's also a use of it and like a liberatory for ideology, but also a place to like let that shit out. Ooh, am I allowed to curse? Like to be among people and like let it and like release it. Anyways, let me just. Moreover, he understood the resignation of Black Christianity as only one element in the culture of Blacks. In Black music, another more strident voice existed opposing that guilt. This music was the rhythmic flauntings of guilty feelings, the let's look up that word. Let's look it up. Let's build a world. Oops. Syncopated. Boom. Sorry. Syncopated, a musical technique that accents weak beats, off beats, or unexpected non-traditional rhythmic positions instead of standard strong beating, disrupting the regular flow. A musical technique that involves playing rhythms together to create an offbeat feeling. Oh, period. Oh, ragtime. It's going to occur with ragtime. The most common syncopation is a short, long, short feeling when counted in 2/4 time. The motif originated with the cakewalk, period. A high stepping dance that was often the finale of minstrel shows. Okay, sorry, I keep sniffling. Syncopated outpourings of frightened joy existing in guises forbidden and despised by others. Negroes had been made to live in but not of the land of their birth. The injunctions of this alien Christianity and the strictures of white laws had evoked in them the very longings and desires that religion and law had been designed to stifle. Blue jazz was a rebel art blooming sedaciously under the condemnations of Protestant ethic. Blue jazz was the scornful gesture of men turned ecstatic in their state of rejection, the recreations of the innocently criminal. The force of science and technology and the processes of the proletarianization of black workers were orchestrating the supersession of black Christian resignation by this second. Derisively? Let's look it up. Derisively angry consciousness. Let's look it up. Derisively, D-D-R. Derisively angry consciousness. Okay, derisive describes mocking, scornful, or contemptuous behavior such as laughter, comments, or heckling designed to ridicule someone. I actually have 2 books that talk about that. Like where you're making fun of somebody, like girl, if you get into the Norton Anthology of African American Literature, it shows how like different ways black people would mock white people. Girl, they funny as fuck. They're funny. Excuse me, they're funny. Yet Wright was also critical of Marxism, the second and more modern radical Western tradition. It too was profoundly limited theoretically and subject to the abuses of narrow political interests. Marxism had ultimately failed to come to terms with nationalism, with consciousness, with racism, with Western civilization, with industrialization, and with the history of blacks. Wright had already demonstrated some of its limitations in Native Son. Daniel Aaron commented on Baker Thomas's communist lawyer had observed, even Boris Marx never really understands Bigger and is frightened by Bigger's vision of himself. Wright made the same point even more tellingly in The Outsider. Wright maintained that the purposes of Marxism as employed in American communism were less analytical than political. The result was neither theory nor praxis, but the achievement of power. Ironically, in the second novel, it was the character of Hilton, also a party functionary, who spoke for Wright. Hilton, driven to candor by desperation, betrays the crude agreement upon which party support of black liberation depended: manipulation. Wright, cross, then reflects to himself, did the average white American suspect that men like Hilton existed, men who could easily rise above the racial hatred of the mob and cynically make use of the defensive attitudes instilled in Negroes as weapons to their own bitter struggle for power? Where's my, I'm going to put a little note in that one. But Wright would instruct us never to expect to hear such revelations as Hilton's. He had heard them as a part of his experience, an experience that he would subject to the Marxian critique that was now also a part of his way of grappling with reality. Marxism, as an ideology and theory of history, Wright argued, was a product of a petite bourgeoisie, in particular the intellectuals. You must assume that I know what this is all about. Don't tell me about the nobility of labor, the glorious future. You don't believe in that. That's for others, and you damn well know it. You jealous rebels are intellectuals who know your history, and you are anxious not to make the mistakes of your predecessors in rebellious undertakings. He was no longer convinced that Marxism as a theory of history or social revolution was correct, but he did understand its seductiveness. He would write in 1960, Marxist ideology, in particular, is but a transitory makeshift pending a more accurate diagnosis. Communism may be but a painful compromise containing a definition of man by sheer default. He suspected that Marxism, alike with Christianity as an ideology, masked complexities of history and social experience. Its truer function was the social and intellectual cohesion of the petite bourgeoisie, a class very different from the proletariat. One minority section of the white society in or under which he lives will offer the educated elite of Asia and Africa or Black America an interpretation of the world which impels to action, thereby assuaging his feelings of inferiority. T. Assuaging. The present principle of the verb assuage means to ease, relieve, or soothe intense feelings of physical sensations. So white supremacy, what it does is it builds a white inferiority complex in white people, right? And that's where the people will act out like a white savior or a white missionary or KKK member, right? And there's a different effect. I mean, there's different but similar effects on said oppressed peoples. That's a whole different conversation. We ain't even going to get into it in this video because we're already at 24 minutes. Okay, 9 times out of 10, it can be easily pointed out in the ideology offered has no relation to the plight of educated Black, brown, and yellow elite. But that ideology does solve something. It enabled the Negro or Asian or African to meet revolutionary fragments of the hostile race on a plane of equality. So it does have some uses. Still, in this, his most devastating criticism of communism, Wright was relying on a notion of class struggle. These men who rise to challenge the rulers are jealous men. They feel that they are just as good as men who rule. Indeed, they suspect they are better. They see the countless mistakes that are being made by the men who rule, and they think that they could do a more honest, a more cleaner job, a more efficient job. Such was Wright's thesis in the development of Marxism as a class-specific ideology. And in some ways, he was echoing Marx's own, but more mystical explanation of Marxism. Finally, in times when the class struggle nears the divisive hour, the process of dissolution going on within the ruling class, the fact that within the whole range of society assumes such a violent, glaring character that a small section of the ruling class cuts itself adrift and joins the revolutionary class, the class that holds the future in its hand. So now a portion of the bourgeoisie goes over to the proletariat, and in particular, a portion of the bourgeois ideologists who have raised themselves to be a level of comprehending theoretically the historical movement as a whole. By the early 1950s, Wright had come to this similar conclusion, one that we have seen he retained for the rest of his life, but with a different meaning. Marxist theory was an expression of petit bourgeois consciousness, and its critique of bourgeois society and capitalism was most fundamentally addressed to the class's suffocation by the authority of the bourgeois ruling class. Yet, the opposition of Marxist theory to capitalist society was useful to Wright, theoretically. Indeed, the historical and revolutionary role that Wright assigned to blacks had at its base a materialist dialectic. As previously indicated, Wright recognized black nationalism as a product in part of both the objective necessities of capitalist development and accumulation and its system of exploitation. We have a book on black nationalism up in here. Ugh! This one, Classical Black, I think I showed it to you. Classical Black Nationalism from the American Revolution to Marcus Garvey. It's good. Sorry, and its system of exploitation. As he turned towards the ideology of black nationalism, he sought to comprehend its emergence in the contradiction of day-to-day experience. I like this book because it talks, you know what? We're already at 27. We're almost done though. Almost done. Look. Excuse me. Okay. Every day in this land, some white man is cussing out some defenseless Negro. But that white bastard is too stupid to realize that his actions are being duplicated a million times in a million other spots by other whites who feel hatred for Negroes, just like he does. He's too blind to see this daily wave of a million tiny assaults build up in a vast reservoir of resentment in Negroes. There is one, the weathering effect, and two, black fatigue. Girl, the internet already, you know what I mean? But the weathering effect. There's what do you call it? It's like say that you're a rock and you're a river, right? And the rock is able to withstand the weather currents, but it's slowly over time, and there's like an erosion, and it makes you depressed and it makes you angry, and finally you snap. You gotta snap though, please, right? Don't let it build up. But smartly, strategically, right? Okay. Thus, Wright echoed another powerful contribution to the development of Marxism, Hegel's The Cunning of Reason. But where Wright differed most with others who could employ a Marxist approach to his characterization of the historical forces of ideology. Ideology was the special political instrument of the petite bourgeoisie. Wright was arguing that the renegades of this class that had served historically to... Maybe I'm wrong about some things, but I don't think I am. If I am, I'll correct myself. Renegades of the class that had served historically to produce the dominant ideas of the bourgeoisie had themselves become contemptuous of the ruling class. The jealous rebels had declared, as Marx himself had written, the bourgeoisie is unfit any longer to be the ruling class in society and to impose its conditions of existence upon society as an overriding law. It is unfit to rule because it is incompetent. In his criticism of Marx, then, Wright was not entirely rejecting it, but was attempting to locate it, to provide a sense of the boundaries of its authority. Like, what are your limitations, right? Because Marxism is coming out of Eurocentric ideology, right? Eurocentric ideology is also producing this ruling class ideology, racial capitalism, the dehumanization and degradation of someone's soul and someone's humanity, right? Okay. As a theory of society, he found it dissatisfying, indeed reductionist. By itself, it was insufficiently prescient. Let's look it up. Let's make sure. I think, guys, I'm so hungry. Prescient? Prescient? Refers to having or showing knowledge of events before they occur, indicating keen foresight or divine prophetic insight. Did I spell that right? Yeah. Of the several levels of collective consciousness. As an ideology, he recognized that it had never transcended its origins. Does it go further? Oh, okay. It remained an ideology for the working classes rather than an ideology of the working classes, right? Like a type of, what's that word? Paternalism. However, as a method of social analysis, he found it compelling. He had not abandoned the conception of the relations of production as a basis for the critique of capitalist society, nor the importance of the class relations of production. Still, the critique of capitalism was only the beginning of the struggle for liberation. It is from this critical perspective that Wright joins with one of the few black women he has sympathetically drawn, Sarah Hunter. When she cajoles her husband, Bob, the frightened and party subservient black organizer, she is speaking for Wright. Everywhere I looked, I've seen nothing but white folk kicking. Sorry, I was about to say the word and I knew the N words. Okay. Sorry. Sometimes it's like, when it just throws you off a little bit. You're like, oh, okay. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. What books do I have by him? I have Native Son and Black Boy. Dang, sorry. I've seen nothing but white folks kicking N words who are kneeling down, and that's again that white inferiority complex. Are you only superior when somebody else is kneeling? Something that Toni Morrison talked about. Are you only tall when somebody else is on their knees? Okay. I want to be one of them who tells the others to obey. See, read your Marx and Organize. From his experience in the American Communist Party and from his readings of Marx, Wright had come to the conclusion that no people's liberation is the result of their abject surrender of critical judgment. Certainly, it was not the prerogative of black intellectuals to surrender the cultural heritage of their people, the emergent revolutionary consciousness of black nationalism. Very little remains then of the right that Harold Cruse presents us. Perhaps, like Baldwin, Cruse had also felt the need to kill the father. Doubtless, too, the explanation for Cruse's error is much more complex. But, irrespective of the origins of Cruse's portrait of Wright, a closer reading of the central works written by Wright over a span of more than 2 decades reveals a most powerful and self-possessed black thinker. Wright struggled towards a synthesis of Marxism and black nationalist thought to match those of his colleagues, George Padmore and C.L.R. James. And together, their several works, along with those of Du Bois, are an extraordinary legacy to blacks in the Western Hemisphere and elsewhere. In them, one can discover an independent and richly suggestive critique of the modern world, a critique whose voice is the most authentic sounding of the brutal depths of Western civilization and its history. There lies in those works the beginning of black revolutionary theory. At the moment when people begin to realize a meaning in their suffering, the civilization that engenders that suffering is doomed. Ain't that something? Ain't that something? Ain't that something? Oh, hold up. At the moment when the people begin to realize a meaning in their suffering, the civilization that engenders that suffering is doomed. Think about like the Western civilization being built off of, now we're on chapter the ending. Period, y'all. Think about the Western civilization being built off of racism, sexism, da 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 da, right? Where it causes unimaginable suffering globally, right? What's FGM? Uh, uh, what is another one? I'm just talking about sexism, right? Domestic violence, right? What's that? There's a like specific word I'm looking for. Femicide. Lack of reproductive autonomy. What's her name? Adriana Smith, and that's just one example out of how many, right? In Chesapeake, there was a case of this guy. He got like 59 years. I don't know how many years he got, but he had like, there was like, I think, I don't know how many women. How many women? They were sterilized. They had unnecessary operations. He was committing Medicaid fraud. All these things that collectively work towards racial capitalism, right? Because he was trying to, he was enrich that doctor was enriching himself off of the suffering of people, primarily Black women. Um, and this is like a global thing, right? There's a meaning behind the suffering of millions of people for the profit of the small few. Think of the people, the billionaires who are investing in this suffering, right? Because it's like, girl, with all this time passed, you would have. Never mind. We're gonna leave it there. Actually, thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. I hope y'all have a wonderful day. Let me know what y'all think of the book thus far. That was thick. That was thick. Anyways, I hope y'all have a wonderful day. Thanks. Peace out.